Welcome to the Architect of Resilience podcast, where we explore the secrets of overcoming life's challenges and unlocking unstoppable strength through deep personal conversations and expert insights.
We have an entirely new series on the Architect of Resilience podcast. I'm really excited about it because it's still under the same philosophy, and it's about being more resilient physiologically. And so there's been an area I've been playing in for about 20 years now, I believe, with peptides. Peptides are a very unique, series of amino acids. Actually, I've got a great piece where I cover peptide fundamentals, but we're just going to go in with a deep dive today. And I'm really excited to welcome Anthony Castor and also congratulate him. He's a valued member of my Endless Evolution community, but he's achieved an extraordinary achievement. He's made history as the first non-physician to earn a fellowship with the Seed Scientific Research and Performance Institute. It's a new role where he's involved with educating physicians and members on key topics like exercise, peptides, nutrition, cellular medicine, while representing the organization. So huge testament. I've known Anthony for a number of years, and so he's going to be joining me on this series on the podcast. It's really great, successfully bridging the world of medicine and strength training, creating a path for both disciplines to grow and share their knowledge and understanding. So our first episode, we are going to dive into a controversial topic, and that's GLP-1 agonists. These are known as semaglutide, Ozempic, retatrutide, liraglutide. There was a new one I was just looking at. Anyway, we're going to dive into those in a bit. But I say controversial because there appears to be a whole lot of fear-mongering and negativity about them in the fitness community. And I'm going to propose a counter to that with the research today, and so is Anthony, about their incredible value. Now, if you disagree with this, please hang on and listen through, because I think you'll understand where we're coming from. If not, it will educate you on, some other topics, because a lot of the pushback is just around, well, it's just eat less, be disciplined. You're going to lose muscle. You are going to have gastroparesis and die. And just look at the number of cases of that, and you'll see that's really a non-issue. But the other does tie to, I think that there is some legitimacy to this, because when I talk to people that are in the medical side of the community, I do see a lot of people that are just pushing this as a weight loss for a bunch of people, and everybody is just taking this base standard protocol that is actually a pretty high dose. Actually, substantially high dose, and I think that's part of the problem. And then following this, ramping it, taking everyone to the maximal dose. So again, there are some issues with this. But on the other side of that, like if we talk about, and we're going to go way beyond weight loss and diabetes in this piece, but when we talk about weight loss or food addiction, the simple answer of, well, it's just eat less, be more disciplined like me, that's a very fitness-based, approach. Food addiction is a much more complicated thing than that. Particularly, it's the only addiction where you have to face that thing every single day. So it makes it even more complicated. So I'm not going to dive into some of those behavioral factors, but if that is your answer, you should not be working with people as on the dietary side. Like it's a very complex thing. So I just want to address this controversy piece up front and say there's two sides of the coin. I think both are right in certain aspects, but we're going to do a deep dive and also talk about some of the dosing issues as it relates with this. So I didn't reorganize this schedule, but yeah, we're going to start off with what GLP-1s are. I'm going to let Anthony kind of kick that off as it relates to weight loss, insulin sensitivity issues. I think it's interesting noting some of the history and the fact that these are actually first research as it relates to the neuroprotective effects, which we're going to get in, not the weight loss. Also, just the history as it relates to, well, we won't get into the whole Gila monster thing, but I find the history of the gastric bypass surgery quite fascinating, where they were, physically reducing the size of the stomach to reduce eating because the stomach would be full. But in retrospect, they found that essentially they were cueing the mechanisms of what GLP-1s do by just having a slowing of that gastric of the upper GI tract, which was then affecting the GLP in the body. And so that, in short, that's essentially what we're doing with GLP agonist at this point in time. But it's really fascinating. We were doing a very dangerous permanently modification surgery of people's stomachs when it was really just affecting receptors and peptides. So, Anthony, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. First of all, I just want to thank you again for having me on here. It's really an honor. And as you said, we've known each other for a number of years. You're somebody I've looked up to and learned from. And so it's just great to be here and really excited to talk about this subject. As you said, there's a lot of misinformation around it. And I think that when we can kind of explain to people what these are, how they work, these are things we naturally produce in our body, and you kind of get a better sense of what's happening. And even past that, all the pleiotropic benefits that come with these. I think a lot of people's minds are going to change, and hopefully this will be a big step forward in health for a lot of people. So I guess kind of good starting point. Let's just go through what the different things are. We've got like a GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide one, GIP, amylin comes into play, and then we've even got to think about things like glucagon itself. So when we kind of understand the role of each of these, it'll make sense what these peptides are going after, how they work, and how they work together, and all that cool stuff. So just give you guys a heads up. I like to use a lot of analogy when I'm explaining things. It was explained to me that learn all the depth, but try to explain it in the simplest way and kind of build up from there. So starting with a glucagon-like peptide one, GLP-1, I kind of think about that as like it's your body's VIP bodyguard. And when you eat, what this bodyguard is going to do is it's going to show up and it's going to make sure that you're not getting out of control with your blood sugar. And it goes right to the pancreas, kind of taps the beta cells on the shoulder and says, time to release insulin. And insulin's a hormone that's going to help get that sugar out of your bloodstream into your cells where it's needed. But the thing with the GLP, it's not just about insulin, it also stops glucagon. And we'll get to this in a little bit here, so it'll make more sense. It stops glucagon, and glucagon would kind of be like the wild party crasher if we're building on this analogy. And it slows down how fast food is going to leave your stomach, so you're going to feel full for longer. Kind of like what Chris was saying with the gastric bypass and that mechanism of like feeling full and less drive to eat. So it's basically like the bodyguard making sure you don't stuff yourself at the buffet. And the next one, continuing with our analogy, gastric inhibitory polypeptide, GIP, that is, it's kind of like the hype man. So GIP is going to be the hype man of your digestive system, and it is just cheering on that pancreas to make even more insulin after you eat, especially when you've had like fatty or sugary foods. It'd be like standing in the back saying, come on, man, you got this, make more insulin. And kind of like my buddies when I'm at a wing eating contest. And GIP also helps store energy, and it encourages fat cells to take in and store fat. So um, there's got to be this balance in there that's making sure your body has fuel for later. And that's why it helps store energy. But it's just like stashing snacks in your backpack before you go on a long trip. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but you want to make sure they get eaten. And then the final player, glucagon, that's kind of like the emergency backup system, and it is literally the opposite of insulin. So insulin you remember, is going to kind of take the stuff out of your bloodstream, drop the blood sugar, and glucagon, the emergency generator, when your blood sugar starts to get low, what it's going to do is say, hey, liver, back up sugar stores. And it's going to start releasing glucose into your bloodstream. And that's going to kind of give you more energy. So just to uh, kind of reflect on where we're at so far, we've got the GLP-1 that's kind of telling the pancreas how much insulin to release, modulating that blood sugar. We have the GIP, the hype man, saying, keep it going, and helping store energy. And then we have the glucagon that essentially is creating energy if that blood sugar gets too low. And the last one, and the only reason I'm putting this in here is you guys are going to be hearing a lot more about this. They're doing some really cool stuff where it's combined with like the GLP-1s, and we'll explain it a little bit more later. But another one to know about, myelin, and we would call that the sidekick in this analogy, kind of like a Batman Robin thing. Um, Interesting bit of trivia: when we think about a type 1 diabetic, they don't release a myelin. And when we think about a type 2 diabetic, they release one bit of a myelin per 100 bits of insulin. So you can really kind of start to see, one, they're released hand in hand, and two, obviously it's going to be a big player. And to kind of give you guys an analogy with that, uh, myelin's like a friend, telling you, like if you guys go out for dinner or whatever, and if you're anything like me, pizza's in front of you, you're tearing it up. Mylan's saying, maybe we should take it slow on the pizza. You're eating pretty fast. You're going to crash afterwards. So it's kind of like that common sense in the background. Um, a little bit more on these, and not to get too spend too much time on this because we got a lot of material to cover. But um, when you think about these working together and everything, they work in different parts of the brain. And that's going to come into play when we talk about dosing. Instead of basically like having to go up and up and up in these things when these signals aren't working quite right, by combining different signals, so like a GLP-1 and a GIP, or a GLP-1, GIP, glucagon, or like a GLP-1, a myelin, we can keep doses at the bare minimum and work on different parts of the brain and really modulate that blood sugar response the way that we need to for all the benefits we'll be talking about.
Yeah. That was a really great discussion on the mechanisms of action. I love the analogies, Anthony. So,
I got to keep it
yeah,
simple for me.
I'm going to do a quick overview of all these lesser known benefits. Now, obviously, you just covered some of the basis ones. So, improved insulin sensitivity, GLP-1 enhances the body's response to insulin, helping to manage blood glucose levels more effectively, particularly beneficial for type 2 diabetes. And appetite regulation, this decrease in food intake by the slowing of the gastric emptying and acting on appetite centers in the brain, which can help with weight management, which will lead to weight loss as well, making an invaluable tool for managing diabetes. The ones that we're going to touch on further, and I'm going to dive into those. Now, a lot of this, the research that I'm going to cite is non-diabetic. So I'm going to pull this for non-diabetic populations just to demonstrate the efficacy of this. And a lot of this is independent of weight loss. So everything we've talked about so far is weight loss, but a lot of these other things that we're going to talk about, from cardiovascular, neuroprotective, anti-inflammatory, and impulse and behavior, all are independent of this. But GLP-1 has been shown to have protective effects on the cardiovascular system, including improving endothelial function, reducing blood pressure, and lowering the risk of, all-cause cardiovascular events. Neuroprotective effects. Emerging research suggests GLP may have neuroprotective effects, potentially reducing the risk of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. We'll dive into the research on that. A lot of this is driven by the anti-inflammatory effects. So I'm going to start with that one, even though I forgot. That's why I said I forgot to reorganize my my presentation there, slides. But the last one on impulse and behavior side. So just a quick segue into that. It does impact dopamine pathways, the reward systems, affecting the central nervous system, and has been shown promising effects in alcohol and drug treatment. And I have seen this stuff firsthand, which we will talk about. So I'm going to start off with the anti-inflammatory, because that is a driver of a lot of these. So the mechanisms of action for the anti-inflammatory effects. So there's an inhibition of the pro-inflammatory cytokines. The GLP receptors activate and suppress the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines like tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 1 beta, interleukin 6. These cytokines are involved in systemic inflammation and contribute to the pathogenesis of several chronic diseases. By reducing their levels, we can mitigate these inflammatory processes throughout the body. They also reduce the oxidative stress, which is closely linked to inflammation, and this helps combat this by promoting the activity of I'm stumbling with my words. I did 3 hours of, it was actually 3.5 hours of video recording before this, so I'm kind of spoken out. But antioxidant enzymes, these enzymes neutralize reactive oxygen species, preventing cellular damage and further inflammatory cascades. This mechanism is especially important in conditions like atherosclerosis and cardiovascular disease. Immune system modulation. These receptors' activation influences immune cells, particularly macrophages and T cells, shifting them from pro-inflammatory to anti-inflammatory state. This immune modulation plays a crucial role in reducing chronic inflammation seen in diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and inflammatory bowel disease. So the benefits, we're going to talk deeper on the cardiovascular effects, but it rolls into that, the neuroprotective effects, and potential in autoimmune disease. So I will cover this one because I don't cover it in the others, but emerging studies suggest that GLP may play a role in management of autoimmune conditions by regulating immune responses and reducing harmful inflammation. This opens up potential application for GLP receptor agonists in conditions like rheumatoid arthritis and multiple sclerosis. And I can tell you, as someone that has autoimmune disease and rheumatoid arthritis, that I have seen significant impact on this. And we also know that injecting directly into arthritic joints will have an impact. I'm not suggesting that anybody here does that listening to this. Clearly, this is something that needs to have a medical intervention if you're going to pursue that. So I think it's gaining a lot of recognition in broader applications beyond diabetes management, particularly in the anti-inflammatory agents. Its ability to reduce those cytokine levels through oxidative stress and modulating the immune system makes promising like therapeutic for these. And I'd love to see more research on it. The research that I have, we've got from peptide protocols, notes, receptor agonists reducing inflammation, and GLP-1 inflammatory effects studies.
Now, that's a really pretty amazing job of covering everything. Just to fill in some spaces and build on what you already said, it does have those amazing effects on the macrophages, specifically like pro-inflammatory cytokines, tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 1 beta, interleukin 6. And what it does is it shifts these macrophages from, you have M1 and M2, and M1 is a pro-inflammatory, I lost my words too, pro-inflammatory state, and M2 is the anti-inflammatory. And they're both important when you think about if you get an injury, there needs to be inflammation to initiate that repair state, but then afterwards you want to be able to switch out of that and promote tissue repair. So they facilitate that switch from an M1 to M2. And then when we think about our immune system and T cells and like Th1, Th17, the regulatory T cells and even neutrophils, with the T cells, it suppresses the activity of Th1 and Th17, and that's kind of, I think my theory, some of the effect of what we see in terms of autoimmune suppression. And then with the neutrophils, it's going to reduce that recruitment, so you don't, and this also with the autoimmune, so you don't see like hyper responders to inflammation. And then what's also kind of cool, in the in the central nervous system, it reduces microglial activation. Like the glial, you hear about glial inflammation in the brain leading to things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, those sorts of things. And by reducing that inflammation in the glial cells, it helps to protect neurons from inflammation-induced damage. So another huge benefit there. And indirectly, and this is really cool because, and it's going to really resonate with a lot of lifters, enhanced or not, you're probably going to have a dysregulated HPA axis if you're primarily sympathetic, really wired to go hard in the gym and normal stress of everyday life. And that HPA axis being dysregulated can have all sorts of effects on everything from like sleep to whatever. But GLP helps to modulate that HPA axis and reduces the release of glucocorticoids. And that is, again, one of the ways that it helps with like the metabolic dysfunction that you see and regulation of blood sugar, that sort of thing. Um, Another cool thing it does is it increases pro-inflammatory adipokines, like adiponectin, and those are things that improve insulin sensitivity and help to um, reduce fat. I think really, I mean, you covered pretty much
Yeah.
everything. Vascular system, it's increasing that nitric oxide, reducing reactive oxygen species, inhibiting nuclear factor kappa beta, and it also modulates the JNK pathway, which is another inflammatory signal, oftentimes associated with like inflammation in metabolic tissues. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we
I,
could go on forever about all the
yeah.
different things.
That's one area I forgot to do a bullet point was metabolic function, right? So, um, but yeah, I mean, let's diving a little bit towards the cardiovascular, and there's several pieces, lots of studies out there. I've got this one on the 2018 study published in the British Journal of Pharmacology, emphasizing the GLP-1's benefits, including effects on atherosclerosis, largely independent of its glucose lowering or weight loss effects. The study demonstrate that GLP-1 receptor activation significantly reduces oxidative stress, improves endothelial function, leading to healthier blood vessels and reduced risk of plaque buildup. And several other research pieces on cardiovascular outcome trials that have shown reduced rates of myocardial infarction, the heart attack, stroke, and cardiovascular death. Again, independent of weight loss, independent of diabetes and blood sugar, we're seeing these effects. So, the main three bullets here are lowered risk of major cardiovascular events, heart failure protection, and blood pressure regulation. So, with the cardiovascular events, receptor agonists such as liraglutide and semaglutide have been shown to significantly reduce the risk of major cardiovascular events, including heart attacks and strokes, in high-risk populations, including those without diabetes. The heart failure you touched on already, but I think the fact that it actually helps repair damaged tissue is just fascinating. It also enhancing the left ventricle function, which again, not just for enhanced folks or prior enhanced folks like myself, but anyone that's a larger like male that has done some serious training over time usually has some issues with left ventricle hypertrophy. And again, this is an area where microdosing could have a very potential positive effect. Again, blood pressure regulation, instead of taking blood pressure regulation, this increases nitric oxide, which is going to promote vasodilation and improve endothelial function. So GLP agonists contribute to lower blood pressure control, reducing the strain on the heart and lowering the risk of cardiovascular disease through that. And the way these happen, again, some of this is straight from the anti-inflammatory effects. reducing systemic inflammation, which is a major driver of these cardiovascular diseases, particularly atherosclerosis, by decreasing pro-inflammatory cytokines, the oxidative stress, and it helps protect the blood vessels from damage that can lead to the plaque formation. The endothelial function I touched on. To dive a little deeper, endothelial cells line the blood vessels and help regulate the vascular tone. Dysfunction in these cells is a precursor to atherosclerosis, and GLP-1 in promoting their proper function aids in preventing arterial stiffening and plaque buildup. Now, I'm a huge benefit of tissue quality as a whole, which is why I always am a promoter of a lot of nitric oxide and nitrate type compounds, but this is working those same pathways and improving the tissue quality of and vascular tone. The vasodilation and blood pressure regulation mechanisms, I think I've hit that pretty well, but lipid metabolism. So GLP-1 has beneficial effects on lipid metabolism by reducing low-density lipoproteins, LDL cholesterol levels, and improving triglyceride profiles. This contributes to a reduced accumulation within the arteries, slowing the progression of atherosclerosis. So yeah, we're seeing less plaque buildup, less oxidative stress, and the last one is the inhibition of foam cell formation. So foam cells, which are macrophages that have ingested large amounts of LDL cholesterol, are hallmarks of atherosclerotic plaques. And GLP-1 receptor activation inhibits foam cell formation by promoting cholesterol efflux, reducing the amount of LDL available for deposit on the arterial walls. So, I mean, this is just absolutely fascinating. This is the driver that got me to start microdosing GLP agonists a couple times. I do a couple cycles per year. I did run some cycles for weight loss, like back in the late, I think 2017, 2018 era, before I built my weight back up for my big squat. But this cardiovascular impact was a driver for me to go, I need to look at this not for any of those other managements and not to drive appetite suppression and shutting that down, but getting enough to start seeing these effects. And I've seen those effects on my blood work, with my lipid profiles, with my blood pressure, and again, personally having issues with atherosclerosis from autoimmune. Again, big drivers, because these are all connected.
Let's dive into the world of optimizing your overall health. With pushing my physical limits, I encountered significant reductions in my health, and I reached out to merichealth as the premier telehealth service. I loved their personalized health coaching from the comfort of my home. They empower you with the choice of self-service diagnostic labs, or what I chose, the guided optimization with expert interpretations of blood work, health coaching, and with medications delivered to my door. merichealth is your partner in optimizing your health. Listeners can seize a fantastic 10% discount off their first blood work with code RESILIENCE at merichealth.com. That's code RESILIENCE for 10% off.
One more thing I might add in. Everybody's, these days it's popular functional medicine, talk about the gut and the gut immune axis, gut brain axis. And another benefit that GLP-1s offer is they're secreted by the enteroendocrine L cells in the gut. And don't worry about the terminology. Just think about when you hear about like a leaky gut and inflammation in joints. Essentially what's happening is you have these tight cell junctions, and when we have endotoxins like lipopolysaccharides, it starts to kind of split those apart, and those start to accumulate, and we get brain fog. So what GLP-1s do, they improve the integrity of that gut barrier and prevent that intestinal permeability and the translocation of these endotoxins and lipopolysaccharides. And to give it some context, because a lot of people hear these big words and it's like, well, one, I don't know what that is, and two, like, what's that mean? So if a lot of people probably tried a ketogenic diet, and ketogenic diet, not exogenous ketones, but a ketogenic diet can lead to a lot of accumulation of these lipopolysaccharides. So it's
I-
not like
you,
it's
you
a,
almost see people with the ketogenic or the carnivore diet like bragging about their high levels, which I think is kind of
yeah,
interesting choice.
I agree.
And I'm not knocking those
And
type of diets; like they're valuable as a tool for certain populations for certain goals, right? So
in acute
yeah,
situations, yeah, absolutely. But it's definitely like when you think about the integrity of your gut barrier and the importance of that, so that you don't get things like SIBOs, so that you don't have those autoimmune reactions from food particles kind of sneaking through and getting trapped in joint spaces. Like it's really important to have that integrity of the intestinal barrier,
yeah.
and it's just another thing that GLPs help with.
Yeah, it's when we start looking at this and as we continue these discussions into other peptides, you're going to see some similarities in the discussions that we have and the pathways that we talk about. I can already tell that without recording those just because my many conversations with Anthony around these subjects. Now, the next one is we're going to dive into the neuroprotective effects. And I'm going to go ahead and cite the research up front. Again, I'm choosing research independent of diabetes weight loss type pieces. So I've got Scientific Reports 2020, 2018, Rollins et al., 2014, Only et al., around these. This is, so if we're going to talk about the benefits, so the benefits, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, cognitive decline and aging. So Alzheimer's disease, studies have shown that receptors, studies have shown GLP receptor agonists reduce amyloid beta plaque formation, a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. They also improve cognitive function in animal models by decreasing these levels of neuroinflammation and oxidative stress. For Parkinson's disease, research indicates that GLP-1 receptor agonists protect I should have grabbed something to drink, Anthony.
I know the feeling.
Research indicates that GLP-1 receptor agonists protect dopaminergic neurons, the cells primarily affected by Parkinson's disease. This neuroprotective action helps preserve motor function and slows the progression of the disease. And with cognitive decline and aging, GLP-1 improves the synaptic plasticity of the neurogenesis, making potential therapeutic agent for age-related cognitive decline. Neurogenesis is just another word for growth of new neurons. It affects on mitochondrial function and oxidative stress further support brain health during aging. So these are the benefits, and those are powerful benefits. How does that happen? Again, reduction in inflammation. GLP-1 has been shown to reduce neuroinflammation, contributing factor in neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. It achieves that by inhibiting the pro-inflammatory cytokines that we already talked about, which are implicated also in neural damage, and the anti-inflammatory action helps protect these from degeneration. Now, enhancement in the the enhancement of neurogenesis and synaptic plasticity, it promotes neurogenesis, particularly in the hippocampus, a region of the brain crucial for memory and learning. It also supports synaptic plasticity, the ability of the brain to form new connections, which is essential for cognitive function and memory retention. I think there's interesting piece about like when you stop getting you stick with the same haircut for the rest of your life. That's the point when new brain connections quit forming. I've got a friend. He's a well-known influencer. He started changing his haircut, and it all of a sudden when he learned that, thinking it would work in reverse, I think. But there's a point around that time frame in the 30s or so, sometimes in the 40s, where that's. We quit growing the brain. It doesn't happen for everybody, and that's a lot of the things that we'll talk about on the mental side of this Architect for Resilience podcast, because you can help create that by challenging yourself with things that are uncomfortable. If jumping in cold water is something you're used to doing, it's not being uncomfortable. It's truly choosing to do things that are uncomfortable. And that can be very different for a lot of people. Back on track. reduction in inflammation, neurogenesis, oxidative stress and reduction. So by reducing, again, the oxidative stress protects the neurons from damage caused by reactive oxygen species. This is critical in preventing neurodegenerative process that lead to conditions like Alzheimer's. Mitochondrial function. We're going to do an episode specifically on mitochondrial function, possibly next week, if not in the next few weeks. But GLP-1 has been found to enhance mitochondrial function, promoting better energy efficiency in neurons. This contributes to overall health of the brain by preventing energy depletion that typically occurs during neurodegeneration. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say, but that's pretty powerful stuff, and that's actually where the research on these compounds started with. Anything to add?
Yeah, it's really fascinating when you look back at like why did they start researching these? They were actually being researched for their neuroprotective capabilities. And when they started to go through this research, they saw people's blood sugar was improving, they were dropping weight. And when you think about those markets, there's just so much more demand for things that are going to help regulate blood sugar and weight loss than a preventative measure for the brain. So that they kind of switch gears. And one of the things, and we'll cover this more in the episode on repurposed pharma, but once a drug's been approved for something, so there's safety established, and it goes through that pipeline, then you can start getting it approved for other things a lot quicker. So it's kind of like, one, where can we get this through the fastest? Two, where can we generate the most funding so we can pay for the studies to have it approved for other stuff? So it kind of makes sense. To unpack the kind of how it works on the cognitive function and everything too, the only thing I'd add to that, and this is really kind of cool for all the people out there that follow that are really into lifting, when we think about acetylcholine, it's the first thing that's going to be released from your prefrontal cortex into the neuromuscular junction to initiate that muscular contraction. And it's also crucial for memory and learning. And one of the things that GLP-1s do that a lot of people don't realize, it increases acetylcholine. So a lot of benefit there. And the other thing it does is it stimulates the release of brain-derived neurotropic factor. And that's exactly what Chris was talking about when you're doing something that's really challenging or uncomfortable. I remember one of the tips I got when I was trying to study stuff and memorize it is do it in small chunks and in between, like do the stupidest balance things, like stand on one leg and try to juggle, because your brain will really be generating that BDNF and it'll make it easier to learn. So
generating that BDNF is great. I forgot about the impact of these on that. That almost ties a little bit into maybe what's happening on the behavioral benefits. You think, Anthony?
Yeah, absolutely. We have GLP receptors in the amygdala and the hippocampus in the brain, but really they're in pretty much every cell in the body. And when we think about like behavioral modification and what's going on, a lot has to do with the effect on that dopamine reward pathway and what GLP is signaling in there. Dopamine's kind of our motivation, our working towards something, and it helps to kind of modulate that. So you got that dopamine that's going to keep you engaged and doing the things that you need to be doing, but it's going to kind of turn down the signal that you get from the reward, like that dopamine hit, when you're doing something that's maybe not beneficial for you. And really the research is, it's amazing. As Chris said, I've seen it firsthand too. And I think the original research, if I'm remembering correctly, was done in Singapore. And I think it was like last May. I believe the study's probably published by now, but just amazing.
Yeah, I've got a study from 2017 in front of me. I had another one that was in an addiction-related psychology publication. I lost that out of my notes for some reason. But yeah, I've seen this firsthand. Anthony and I talked about this a few times where, we've got friends with either alcohol or opiate addictions and seen tremendous changes in those populations, even gambling. It's really fascinating, the behavioral effects around addiction and impulse control. Yeah, and it's easy to see it firsthand. There is like a caveat though, and this is where again, like why you don't want to taste the dosing too high, because those dopamine hits, if they go down, all of a sudden, like if you push that high, like you're not going to enjoy some of the things in life that you enjoy, where things just become bland, right? It'll be the best way to put that,
Exactly.
right? So, you know, yeah, but addiction control. Preclinical studies have shown that GLP-1 receptor agonists reduce alcohol and drug intake in animal models by decreasing rewarding effects of these substances, suggesting they could be useful in treatment for substance abuse disorders. They've seen the same thing with nicotine. I've seen a few different other studies. Again, those are animal models, but I can tell you myself, Anthony can tell you, and other clinicians that work with these populations are seeing the same thing. So obviously, you're going to see an impact on compulsive eating disorder, right? These agonists have been effective in reducing binge eating behaviors and aiding weight management by enhancing satiety and reducing food cravings. But the broader implications are massive, and this is where I think some of like the breakdown. Well, actually, so impulse control and ADHD. I think that this is like a key. Like we're seeing an increase in ADHD. We're seeing a increase on this. I think brought about by our societal. Again, this is Duffin theory, but just being connected, having technology in our face, the shortening of attention spans, like we're seeing more of this. And then, of course, obviously, in those same countries, we're seeing the increase in the weight issues, right? So I think that there's a lot of short circuiting of our brain through the stimulation and shortening of the attention span. And so yeah, GLP-1, impulse control, and ADHD behavioral disorders, the regulation of dopamine and other neurotransmitters associated with reward-seeking behaviors has led researchers to explore its role in ADHD, where simple impulse control is often impaired. Now, more research is needed, but they're starting to see an improving in attention and reducing impulsivity. And again, clinicians working with these populations are seeing those effects. And as Anthony suggested or stated already, the reward pathway modulation is the driver here. That GLP-1 receptor agonist influences the mesolimbic dopamine system, which plays a critical role in the rewards and pleasure-seeking behaviors. By modulating the system, GLP-1 helps regulate reward responses, reducing cravings and impulsive actions. Now, listen to my caveat earlier about enjoying life too. Appetite, satiety, we already discussed. Neurotransmitter regulation. GLP-1 reduces the release of neurotransmitters such as dopamine in response to reward stimuli, food, drugs, alcohol, lowering the propensity for addictive behaviors and compulsive actions. So yeah, I find this piece absolutely fascinating, and it is something that I have used with people that I work with fully outside of compulsive eating disorders. So, yeah, I think, did you have anything to add on that, Anthony? I mean, you kind of hit a lot of it
Yeah,
already.
your intuition was right on with GLP-1s and potentially helping with ADHD. When you think about ADHD, it's going to particularly affect that prefrontal cortex and the striatum, which are both really, really important for like attention and impulse control. And those are two areas that GLP-1 can interact with, interacting with that prefrontal cortex. It's going to help to kind of modulate the dysfunction in the dopamine receptors and yeah, exactly what you were talking about. There's um, I don't want to bore people with the specifics of the part of the I'm getting carried
Yeah.
away, the ventral tegmental area and nucleus accumbens, but yeah, you're exactly right. I think it can be part of a part of a protocol that could perhaps have some benefit, probably have some benefit for people that are dealing with ADHD, while also doing things like decreasing oxidative stress, improving cardiac function. I mean, it just seems like that would be so much better choice than reaching for like amphetamines or that sort of thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, that's I have been diagnosed with pretty severe ADHD. If you hadn't, if I imagine most of my listeners were not surprised by that, but you maybe see why I'm a big proponent of GLP. Not using any now, and it's been a while since I have. But like I said, I'll use
Yeah.
microdose a few times a year. Now, we didn't cover the topic of PCOS. I think the GLP-1s are a tremendous choice for specific applications of PCOS. Have you dealt with that at all or had any thoughts on that?
It definitely makes sense that they would be because one of the side effects from the PCO, well, I guess a couple things. One, you're going to have a dysregulated HPA axis, and as we talked about previously, it's going to help modulate that. And then one of the, I guess, side effects of the PCOS is going to be poor blood sugar control, and it's helping with that. So it really seems like maybe a little bit on the hormonal side, but definitely in terms of controlling the blood sugar, there's going to be some value
Yeah.
there.
One thing we did miss was talking about the muscle preservation, because that is one of the fear-mongering pieces of people saying it's causing massive muscle wasting. Why would you do that? When the research is that they're reaching to with that is citing sedentary populations, again, with substantial weight loss. So yeah, if you take somebody that is, a 60 plus year old that doesn't have any physical activity, you cut their calories like massively, and you don't make sure that they're having adequate protein intake in their training, yeah, they're going to lose muscle and fat. Now, I'd like to talk about people like Dr. Spencer Nagalski, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, Dr. Tina Moore, who all work with very substantial populations using GLP-1 agonists. And they see the opposite of that with those, because they are having those clients also do those things, which is most anybody listening to this podcast is some level of physical activity and understanding protein intake. And if you do that, we think about the improvement in insulin sensitivity, the improvement in anti-inflammation. What are you going to have? Well, you're going to actually have an environment that is muscle preservatory, not lost. And that's what I've seen in myself. That's what I've seen with people, and that's what those doctors are seeing in people, is they're able to maintain muscle mass better than without, and not seeing that. I think that, outside of that, we could also look at like, how do we stave off muscle wasting with using synergistic peptides? Growth hormone secretagogues. I know that you've got some great ideas, Anthony. We'll talk about this in synergistic stack component of it, but I want to drop that out there, because this is just absolute hogwash when it comes to those statements. So obviously I see why there's research showing what they're able to cite, but there's plenty of places that we can point to that are just clearly not seeing that. You talked a lot about the gut health. I didn't put that as a bullet point. Obviously, that's a major driver of a lot of these pathways as it relates to not just the anti-inflammatory being one of the background conditions driving this, but I think the gut brain barrier, or the gut barrier, and that impact on gut microbiota, systemic inflammation as it results to it, digestive health function, and then obviously the gut brain connection as well. I don't know if there's anything that we want to add on that, but I think it's important to note that. So just trying to cover all the other bases before we jump into choosing the right GLPs, dosage, synergistic stacks.
Yeah, no, I think that covers pretty much all. But to build on what you said about the uh, fear mongering and muscle loss, I mean, complete hogwash. And if you think about it, like if you weren't taking a GLP-1 and you were to reduce your calories significantly and you were to dehydrate yourself, you're going to lose muscle. So
Exactly. Like like
it's
you
like,
take a sedentary person, massively reduce that, don't have protein, and don't
and on
train.
top of that, stop working out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, indirectly, GLP-1s have positive effects on myostatin inhibition. And that comes through what you already talked about with reducing inflammation. And they have a nutrient partitioning effect. So that actually helps to drive
Yep.
anabolism. And
It,
by reducing that oxidative stress, it improves the function of the mitochondria. So, yeah, I mean, it's
from a
just
mechanisms of action standpoint, it increases the preservation of muscle tissue. So
100%.
like
Yeah.
that is like that's why I said it's absolute hogwash. Like now, if you
Yeah.
take something that has mechanisms of action for increasing muscle preservation and you put them in an environment without the proper nutrient intake, dehydration, and no training, yes, you're going to have muscle loss. Like there's only so much that you can do if you don't have the right environment to begin with.
I always laugh. I mean, when people talk about it, and I shouldn't laugh, but when people talk about the whole losing muscle thing, I'm like, I mean, if you work hard enough at it, you can lose some muscle, but you've basically given yourself a head start towards health. You've got a perfect environment to gain muscle, or at the very least, preserve it. All you got to do is just drink water, make sure you're getting enough protein. Go get 2 workouts a week, and get some steps in during the day. Your body's going to hold on to the muscle. Like if you're losing muscle, that unfortunately usually correlates with people just kind of leaning on these for that appetite suppression,
Yes.
and that's kind of where the problem comes in with then the doctor. And this is really, both Chris and I share this vision of bridging that gap between medical and strength training. The doctor, by no fault of their own, just doesn't have time to learn all the stuff about proper training recommendations. So it's a lot easier to follow the safety guidelines and say, well, we'll just give you more
Yeah.
and more and
Every
more.
2 weeks, we
When in
just
fact,
add this much until we hit
yeah,
max
and in
dose.
fact, as we get this bridge built and they have competent professionals they can lean on, then they can say, I've got this person that's on GLP-1s, and they feel like they're kind of stalled out. I'd love for you to have a conversation with them, make sure all the basic boxes are checked. If we need to, we could go up in dose, but I think there's probably some stuff we can do, and there we go.
Yeah. So I'd like you to take the lead on the choosing the right GLPs, and I'll jump in on synergistic attacks and dosage and protocols and interventions as well. So
Sure, yeah. So with the GLP-1s that are out there right now, we have uh, just kind of we'll build up. So the first one, kind of think about, we've got semaglutide, and semaglutide, if you're getting prescription, going to be the Wegovy or Ozempic, and it's just a straight GLP-1. So if you remember back to the early part of the discussion, we explained what a GLP-1 is, what it does. Then we have tirzepatide, and tirzepatide is going to be a dual agonist, and it's going to modulate GLP-1 as well as GIP. And then we have a triple agonist. Um, keep adding and adding and adding. Triple agonist, retatrutide, and that is going to modulate, like tirzepatide, GLP-1, GIP, and then also glucagon. So those are kind of the three main players. Now, to kind of branch off of that, we also have Mazutitide, which is huge over in China. It's past their approval and everything. I imagine it'll be here soon. That is a GLP-1 glucagon mimetic. Then we have, but no GIP. And then we have a shorter acting GLP-1, which is liraglutide. And liraglutide is basically like a semaglutide is a once a week shot, really slow releasing. And, when there's that barrier of entry for people who don't love giving themselves a shot, the awesome thing about it is now we've got something that maybe they don't have to do but once a week. So really kind of nice there. Um, then there's the original, the OG exenatide, and that's the one that when people talk about like the Gila monster saliva, that was the one it was formulated off of. And then there's some really cool ones in the pipeline too. There's dunaglipron, which is GLP-1 receptor agonist, and it's basically it does just like a regular GLP-1, like a semaglutide, liraglutide, but it's being developed as an effective oral. Semaglutide's available as an oral, but it's just poor bioavailability, and this one looks like they're going to be able to solve that problem. And there's Kegrasema, which is it'll be a combination of that amylin that we talked about earlier, amylin and GLP-1, and that's really cool because you're targeting more areas of the brain, and you've got two things that are at a really low dose that are sending a sufficient hunger suppression signal, and then there will probably be some more of the oxyntomodulin analogs, and those are just again the combination of the GLP-1 glucagon receptors agonists like the mazutide I talked about a minute ago. So with all these choices in front of us, you start thinking like, gosh, I mean, I just want to take the GLP-1. Like, which one's best for me? And it kind of comes down to, I think about the person that I'm talking to, what's their goal? So are they coming in with a skewed lipid panel? Are they coming in, they need to lose weight, but they can't put the bottle down? Or they need to lose weight, they can't stop eating? Or they need to lose weight and they got a low energy expenditure? How adverse are they to frequency of injection? Is it somebody that like you pull a insulin needle out and they hide under the couch? Or is it somebody that's like, hey, hand it over, I'll do it? So those are all kind of things that are going to factor into that decision-making process. So just to give you, we'll give a couple of examples. So if somebody's starting out and they need to lose some weight, lipid panel is skewed, and they're they do eat some of the wrong foods, but really it's just, for lack of a nicer way to put it, it's like their labs look like a train wreck. Um, Tirzepatide's a good starting point in my opinion because it's going to have a little bit more effect on lipid profile. You're going to get not generally speaking, not quite as strong of a GLP-1 signal, so less for most people, and there are those outliers, but for most people, less digestive distress. And you're kind of checking more boxes at once. Um, if I've got somebody coming in that has addictive behaviors and big overeater, semaglutide, terrific choice. And if that same person, like we give them the semaglutide, lowest possible starting dose, 0.25 milligrams, and they're still having kind of a bad reaction to that. If they're not injection adverse, that might be a good opportunity to lean on liraglutide because with the daily injections, it has a faster clearance time. You can kind of pick a smaller dose and see a faster effect. So you could go down super low on that, and it's going to be out of the system pretty fast. So if there is a little bit of discomfort, and we'll talk about some things you can do to kind of alleviate that, then it's an easier way to manage it. And then the retatrutide, when you have somebody that has low energy expenditure, so a lot of executives that I work with are people that just, by no choice of their own, they just, everybody's leaning on them. They're at their desk all day, so they're just not getting energy expenditure like they need to. That's where I feel like something like a retatrutide can be a good tool, or even the mazutide that should be here in the U.S. soon, because with the modulation of glucagon, it's going to liberate sugars and fats for energy. So that's kind of the thought process behind, with all these different tools out there, what do we reach for?
Yeah. So with synergistic stacks, like I mentioned earlier, like CJC 1295 and ipamorelin, they'd be a good choice. Anything of the growth hormone releasing peptides are going to enhance those growth hormone levels, leading to better fat metabolism, muscle maintenance, and really facilitate these pathways for weight loss and metabolic improvements. Tesmorelin may be another good choice in that. This is really great for insulin sensitivity, enhancing insulin sensitivity, reducing appetite, improving growth hormone reduction, particularly visceral fat. It has a pretty potent impact on that in your overall metabolic health. If you want to improve the immunity, thymosin alpha 1 may be a really good one. Really ramping up those anti-inflammatory properties would be a choice for stacking with that with chronic inflammation or autoimmune disease. Healing, if you wanted to, focus on, again, anti-inflammatory effects, reducing inflammation, support gut healing, tissue repair, overall recovery. BPC 157, if you're focused on the gut impact, you would use BPC as the oral, as an arginate salt. TB 500 would be another one to put in there with systemic inflammation, tissue healing. Cognitive functions, CMAX would be a good one for the neuroprotective effects. Enhancing cognitive function, brain repair, maybe a combination useful for people dealing with cognitive decline or neuroinflammation or brain injuries. And then eptathalon. I've really loved eptathalon myself. It's been a few years since I've run it, but when combined with GLP-1, eptathalon can amplify the anti-aging and cognitive benefits. Both peptides can help reduce oxidative stress and inflammation, making this stack particularly beneficial for long-term health and brain function. What are your thoughts? That's my quick run through.
No, that's a great run through and really covers a lot. I think if when we think about kind of step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, like how what's my thought process in building a protocol, I always try to think about what's going to check the most boxes. And usually, if we're starting with a GLP-1 or any of the ones that we mentioned, good place to go after that is going to be the growth hormone releasing peptides, secretagogues. And the reason for that is growth hormone is going to help everything from brain function, tissue health, retaining lean muscle mass, losing body fat, and one of the and we'll be doing a lot more in-depth stuff about growth hormone and effect on blood sugars. One of the knocks against it had always been, if you take growth hormone, people would say, you can make yourself diabetic, but if you've got something in there that's regulating the blood sugar, then kind of canceled out the negative side of it. Cool thing about how these GHRHs, GHRPs work is essentially there's a signal sent from whatever part of your body needs growth hormone. There's over 100 isoforms of growth hormone we make. And when that signal is released, it signals for the pituitary to make growth hormone, and then there's a signal for it to be pulsed out. So it's just like having a stereo. You can crank it up to 10, but you can't crank it up to 12. So you never have to worry about blowing the speakers. So going back to building the protocol, if somebody's taking a GLP-1 specifically for the goal of weight loss, and we are going to layer something in on top of it, I would use tesamorelin and CJC 1295. And the reason for that is because those two, growth hormone releasing peptide combo, neither of those work through the ghrelin pathway. And ghrelin is one of the ways that we can signal to make growth hormone, but at the same time, kind of double-edged sword, because that's one of the things that'll drive appetite. So it wouldn't make a lot of sense if you're already overeating to throw something in that's going to essentially tilt that side of the scale a little bit more just for the benefit of growth hormone when you have two amazing
Yeah.
options available.
Yeah, so was it like
Um,
MK677 or something that works on ghrelin pathways? It's going to drive up appetite. It's going to drive actually blood sugar up a lot more than you want.
yeah,
Those would be ones to avoid.
All right, guys, we talk a lot about mental resilience on this podcast, but let's talk about another type of resilience. That's movement resilience. We want to move well, recover better, and do it for life. And it starts with your feet. And you can start today with Naboso. Naboso is a sensory technology company founded by a functional podiatrist. And all their products feature a texture to stimulate, strengthen, and awaken your feet. I use their splay toe spacers and Neuroball to release my feet at the end of every day. They also have these textured recovery socks that feel like a mini massage when you walk around. If you're looking for an effective way to bulletproof your feet, head to naboso.com, that's NABOSO.com, and use code RESILIENCE for 20% off.
and the unique benefit, as Chris said, with tesamorelin, it was actually brought to market and is on market as a prescription for dyslipidemia. So with AIDS patients, what happens is sometimes they'll store fat in places that are just not conventional to store fat. And when you inject tesamorelin into fat or in these dyslipidemic situations, it's going to like spot reduce. The other cool thing is by doing that, it decreases visceral fat, and that's the problematic one when we think about like heart disease and that sort of thing. And on top of that, it's going to help balance out that lipid panel by getting rid of the bad fat. So recap, it's we've got our GLP-1, and if it's weight loss related, then we're going to use like a tesamorelin CJC. If it's not weight loss related, then there's a lot of other ones that you can choose from, and we'll cover those in another episode. So then the next thing I think about, like, what else can we add to make this even better, more effective? And what are some of the boxes we might not have checked? Everybody's probably heard of by now NAD plus, and I know a lot of people are running out and getting the IVs. I don't advise that you do that, and I'll explain why.
Oh, good. I don't
Um,
either, but I want to hear yours.
so when you think about NAD plus, it's got a lot of benefits. It's going to essentially it donates electrons, so it gives your cell energy. It is going to help with uh, synthesizing DNA, all that important stuff. We can do a whole episode on like NAD and all this stuff, but um, one of the things that happens, so if you've had an injury, you're going to have senescent cells. If you're over the half century mark like me, you're going to have senescent cells. You might have some cancer cells that are kind of sliding under the radar, not problematic yet, but they're sliding under the radar. And what happens if you dump NAD in the system on these senescent and cancer cells, they have upregulated CD38. CD38, just easy way to explain it. Think about it as a magnet that's going to grab those electrons and fuel the growth of those cells. And there's a weaker magnet on your healthy cells. So, these healthy cells that you're expecting to give energy, they're starving. And the cells that you don't want to give energy to, I mean, they're getting electron overload and replicating and replicating. So all of a sudden, you've got this population of like really bad cells. So a better way to go about it, because NAD is absolutely important and we want to have it for so many things. We just don't want to have too much of it. We want it to kind of trickle in at an appropriate level so that um, even though the good cells don't have as loud of a voice, they still have a voice, and they can, kind of reach out, grab the electrons, and take the majority of them, despite you got the bad cells yelling. So the way we do this, we would use something like I like 5-amino-1-MQ. It's an oral peptide, and it decreases. It's called NNMT. It's an enzyme that breaks down NAD. So just to kind of think about what we have here for a second, our body makes NAD, and people say the levels decline as we get older. Usually what's happening, I mean, they do to some degree, but usually what's happening is the NNMT enzyme's increasing. So if we decrease that enzyme, that means that NAD that we have is going to be active for longer. So there we got NAD in our system, and it's going to the right cells. And then we still have one problem we got to solve. We got to get rid of that CD38. We don't want anything going to cancer or senescent cells. So a simple way you can do that, you can add in apigenin. You'd want to take, I take 400 milligrams in the evening, hour before I go to sleep, reduces inflammation in the brain, downregulates CD38 so that, again, that NAD is going to the right place, and it even helps with sleep. So easy solution right there.
Nice.
Um,
I'm a big fan of
and
1-MQ as well.
uh,
Well, let's.
yeah,
I don't want to get too far off track because these are some other episodes,
yeah,
and we definitely need to do a piece on senescent cell reduction. I know we've
yeah.
got some interesting ideas on that. Let's jump into dosage protocols and interventions, unless I'm cutting you short on this.
No, it's only other thing I would say. I like to add in anytime you're using a GLP-1 and there's going to be synergy there, both for brain health and digestion, is TUDCA, TUDCA, and TUDCA is a protein chaperone, so it prevents protein misfolding that could lead to like amyloid plaque, but it also increases formation or bile acid secretion. So when we think about like that gastroparesis that people talk about. Um, that's a that's a good kind of guard against that. And while at the same time, I'm synergistically doing something to amplify the brain protecting effects, and um, then hydration would be the other one that I think is important to talk about. And for that, the everybody's thinking, I'm drinking water, doing good, maybe even put some electrolytes in there, but there's a better way to do it. You can use uh, something like when you think about creatine's a neutral osmolyte, and it causes that cell swelling. So it's better hydration. And when the cell is better hydrated, just like a balloon, if it's blown up all the way, when it's full, it's going to have better uh, sending signals and receiving signals. And when you think about how a peptide works, it's cell signaling. So that's one of the things, cell volume, that's going to allow you to stay at that low dose of a peptide and get the highest uh, rate of return on the amount that you're putting in. So with the creatine, the other one I really like, and this has synergy for those cardiovascular benefits you were talking about, is going to be taurine. Taurine, another neutral osmolyte, and the only one that I'm aware of that only amino acid I'm aware of that is metabolized in cardiac tissue. So that would be kind of the
So,
gold standard stack.
so quite a question on that.
Uh-huh.
So TUDCA is ursodolic acid, which
Uh-huh.
is synthetic bile duct fluid, but TUDCA is taurine bound to UDCA. Does that taurine become available, or do you need to separately add taurine as well if you're taking TUDCA? I'm assuming so.
Actually, that's a really good question. I don't know when it breaks down if the taurine stays bound. The other reason I add in the taurine is because taurine prevents oxidation of fatty acids. So, like fish oils, a lot of lifters are taking a higher dose of fish oils, as they should, to increase production of pro-resolving mediators and decrease inflammation. But in doing so, there can be oxidation. So by taking taurine, it's a real easy way to kind of safeguard against that. So um, I'd still add in the taurine, but honestly, I don't know the answer to that. So that's awesome. I love having stuff to research, and I will get an answer for you.
So I think about this as tissue quality, and I've got a great piece on tissue quality. And so creatine, taurine, and then I'm gonna say straight up, Build Fast Formulas, Vasoblitz is hands down the best overall formulation for improving, cellular hydration. There's four components of this, but two different nitric oxide pathways, betaine, basically really shuttling this. And so anyone that's using, any, compounds as a whole or training as a whole, but it's going to make all of these things perform so much better by shuttling things to the tissue, getting those nutrients there, the turnover, we've got the flow of fluids and blood, and it's just absolutely a phenomenal hands down product that is going to make everything. It's going to amplify the effects of everything that you're doing. So use it for a month because it's something that takes a lot of people are not aware of this because they put some of these compounds in your pre-workouts, usually not the adequate dose or not all of the products even, but it needs to be dosed on a chronic, that's a daily and build in your system like creatine does, not an acute basis as a you take it once and you get the effects. Yes, you do. You're going to feel it on day 1, but you're going to feel it more on day 3, more on day 7, and day 21, you're going to have the full effects of that. And so it's really important to have this in a non-stimulated formula. So sorry for the tangent and pimp of an amazing product, but it's just like a foundation piece I recommend. Add creatine, add taurine, and really great. I'm going to look into let's get back on the taurine. If you're taking TUDCA, I believe that you would need to. I think that it's probably not going to be available, but that's a really great thought. Let's
Yeah.
jump into dosage, and since we're covering so many compounds, I really like the guidelines of your approach to looking at the blood sugar levels. But as a note, like a lot of even the starting dosages that you're provided, it's almost start at half of that, right? And you're going to bump the effects not to crush your appetite, because again, that's going to make you kind of crush your joy for life at the same time if you push it up that much. Maybe I'm overstating that, but I'm trying to drive home a point here. But Anthony has a really great way of approaching this from also looking at your fasting blood sugar levels. So let's dive into that, because I don't think that we want to dive into the dosing protocols for each of those individuals. Now, if you want some guidance on this, you can always reach out to Anthony or myself. Check out the Endless Evolution community on the school platform. There should be links wherever you're checking this out. Yeah, dive into methodology, Anthony.
Thank you. Yeah, so when we think about these compounds and why they were essentially first brought to market, blood sugar regulation, weight loss. So blood sugar regulation kind of tips us off that there should be a favorable effect on what we're seeing when we measure our blood sugar. So what I like to have people do is, we see where their blood sugar's at, where their fasting blood sugar's at. A CGM would be ideal, but you can do the finger stick. And we really want to see somebody between like 85 to 95 would be where I think people ought to be. That Once we kind of get them there, and for a lot of people, you start them on that minimum dose, and you're seeing that fasting glucose stay around where you want it to be. Once we get them in that healthy range, then if they're not losing weight and they're saying, hey, I'm not losing weight, maybe we should raise my dose, I would disagree. I think that that probably indicates these are still working. I mean, we can see that by the blood sugar staying in the correct range, but there's probably something else that we need to address, and that might be as simple as hydration. That might be taking a look at what they're doing with their training. Is that driving up cortisol, which would increase sugars in the bloodstream and prevent them or increase the breakdown of muscle tissue, and then unfortunately see some muscle loss that maybe would lead to a slower metabolism. And so kind of in summary, what I like to do is figure out a kind of a target blood sugar range instead of a target scale weight. And when we're in that target blood sugar range, and in my experience, I've found that that can be done with really like minimal dosing. Once we're in there, it's just about staying in there. And that's where we start to add in these other synergistic compounds to drive that weight loss, keep that going, but not raise the dose. Because anytime, no matter what it is, whether we're talking about nutrition supplement, peptide, pharmaceutical, the more you're increasing the dose, the less benefit you're going to get from it, the more likely you are, if there are going to be side effects, to run into some of those. So um, always get the max out of the minimum and only go up when there's an actual reason to go up. That going up because the scale's not budging, in my opinion, is not, even if your goal is weight loss, is not a reason to right away increase that dose.
Awesome. I think that is great spot to conclude this on. Do you have any additional things that you want to touch on that we didn't hit?
Um, I think we really did a pretty good job of covering everything. You did amazing research, and it's so cool to see like this isn't just stuff people are talking about. Like there's really good science behind this, and I think as you pointed out too, even more than just weight loss or blood sugar management, like you can really be doing something proactive for later in life with your health. Um,
Yeah, and that's I'm approaching the half century mark myself, and I like to think that we both not just do the research, but demonstrate this, in our lives, and it's a visible marker for those that see us, interact with us, and see how we live. And I hope that this piece has hopefully maybe changed some people's perspectives around this. We'll see if those people with differing perspectives are worth sitting down for an hour and a half and listening to us. But it's great discussion, and check out the Endless Evolution community if you get a chance to learn more and interact with our group. Tons of great free courses on there. Anthony, myself, and many others are on there. And look forward to upcoming episodes. I think we're jumping into mitochondrial function next. We've got the senescent cell that we're going to dive into. We've got a whole series of stuff we're planning out. So hang in. It's going to be a lot of exciting research.
oh yeah.
All right.